Hey everyone, welcome. I'm Naomi and today I am going to teach you how to do Warrior One pose. So Warrior One is sort of a classic yoga pose, and there are a lot of misconceptions about the alignment of Warrior One. So mostly I'm going to show you what the basic form of the pose is, what some of the common misconceptions and misalignments are around this pose, and some of the things that you can do to prep for the pose. So just one or two or three poses that you can do to get your body a little bit more ready for Warrior One. So let's get started. So first things first, Warrior One, and I'm going to show it from the side and from the front, is a pose in which your front leg is bent, your back leg is straight. Okay, your front thigh is bent roughly about at a 90-degree angle, and your back foot is turned a little bit more forward than out. So like in Warrior Two, so my right leg is forward, left leg is back, my left foot is a little bit more parallel to the back edge of my mat, but in Warrior One, it's a little bit more on an angle. So it's not all the way forward, so it's not all the way into a lunge, somewhere in between. Okay, and then ultimately, like in most standing poses, you don't want to be overarched towards your front leg. You're really aiming to have your pelvis neutral, arms up, right? Warrior One. Ta-da! What it looks like from the front, so this is my left leg is forward, right leg is back. I'm going to go just a little bit on the diagonal so you can see. Same idea. Front thigh is parallel, back foot is a little bit more on the diagonal, a little bit more forward than it is out. Arms are up. Okay, and there are a lot of different ways to have the arms up. Sometimes classically arms are up, palms are together. Sometimes arms are just up, wide apart. Sometimes people wave them from side to side like they're at a rave or like they're celebrating. You can do with your arms what you want. And that also generally, I think, in my opinion, depends on what you're actually doing in terms of the rest of your practice. But generally speaking, arms straight up is a good place to be, okay? So now let's talk about some of the misconceptions about Warrior One. So first things first, what I hear a lot about when it comes to Warrior One is that you want to square your hips toward the front of your mat. So what that looks like, and I'll show both ways first. So what that sort of looks like is like you're trying to twist your hips all the way forward over your front leg, arms up. So you're really trying to work that squaring action, okay? What that looks like from the front, slightly on the diagonal, is just, again, same idea, trying to turn my hips so that they're more in line with my front leg. Now, there isn't necessarily anything wrong with that. It's pretty aggressive action. For some people, it's not a big deal. For others, it can be, but it's not important. Okay, it's the first thing that I want to tell you is that you do not have to square your hips to the front of your mat. Okay, you just don't. Okay, now I think this is really important because it's just one of the most common instructions when it comes to Warrior One. A little bit more important is just to make sure that your front heel is in line with your back heel. Okay, that's just going to give you a little bit more space for your hips so that if you did want to turn them a little bit, you'd have more room. So if you were heel to instep, which is a little bit more commonly the alignment for something like Warrior Two, that asks a lot more swivel of your hips, a lot more mobility of your back leg in particular. So I generally say, if you're going to align your feet, having yourself heel to heel is going to give you a little bit more room for your hips so that you can move them. Okay, now more importantly than having your hips squared to the front, again, you want to have your hips level and you want to have your front thigh pretty close to parallel. So if my left leg is forward, my right foot is back and I'm heel to heel, instead of trying to square my hips, what I'm really trying to do is move my torso. If I'm going to turn anything, I'm going to turn my torso. Now in order to do that, I have to really work my back leg and I want to fire up my foot from ball of my big toe to my inner heel, really squeeze it up toward my inner thigh. So that really tones my leg. That tone in my leg is going to give me the opportunity to turn my thighs slightly. So they're a little bit more on the diagonal. So I'm pointing toward the front right corner of my mat. What that then allows me to do is move the top of my pelvis up, bottom of my pelvis down so my pelvis is more neutral. Then I can turn my torso a little bit more. And then I can take my arms up. Okay? So that's your Warrior One. And there are a couple of ways to get into Warrior One so that it feels a little bit easier to get into. This wide stance where I'm starting is a good place to be. So starting from a wide stance is a good place to be. Usually the way that you get into it is from like a sun salutation, right? So it's like you're in downward facing dog, lift a leg up, step the leg forward, come on up, Warrior One. right? And that's relatively easy too. The only downside of that is that if you're not paying attention, the tendency is to take your weight really far forward into your front leg, swing your arms up, and then go back. And remember, you want more of a neutral pelvis. So if you're really just still working on learning the basic form of Warrior One, I recommend coming from this wide-legged stance. You want your legs to be just as wide apart as they would for Warrior Two. Say that again, because I think I said it very quickly. I have a habit of doing that when I get excited. I'm excited about Warrior One. So you want them to be about as wide apart as they would be for Warrior Two. And the way to measure that is when you bend your front knee, you're looking for your thigh to be roughly at a 90-degree angle. Okay, your front thigh roughly parallel. Okay, now once I've gotten that, I can turn my back foot in slightly. Again, create that same tone from my inner foot, big toe, inner heel, all the way up through my inner thigh. Okay, keep that as I turn my hips and my thigh a little bit more inward, in particular my right thigh, the back thigh inward. You can turn my pelvis slightly toward that front right corner of the mat and then bend my knee. Now the other big thing here is, again, the tendency is to have the top of the pelvis forward, so I can bend my back knee slightly. Now what that does is it lifts the outside edge of my foot away from the floor. No big deal. Okay, it's not a problem. I'm going to put it back down. But that enables me to move the top of my pelvis up, bottom of my pelvis down, and then I can re-extend through my right foot. Bam. Pelvis is neutral, so I'm not swinging too far forward. Okay? Once you get that basic form, you can very easily do your sun salutation, okay, which is the traditional sun salutation, right? You come into your Utkatasana, fold forward, he would jump back. I'm not. But let's say you're back in downward facing dog. You lift your leg up, step it forward, put your back heel down, and then as you come up, you lift from the top of your pelvis up. So instead of lifting up and landing on your front leg, you can lift up from the back of your body, top of your pelvis up, bottom of your pelvis down. Really squeeze your left thigh inward so your upper left inner thigh is active. Arms up. Okay? And then you can come back down, do your sun salutation, whatever it is you're doing, right? So that's another simple way of getting into Warrior One once you're used to it, okay? The other thing that tends to be, I think, a misunderstanding about Warrior One is that you don't have to get your thigh parallel to the floor. Now, you don't have to, right? Like the yoga police are not going to come lock you up if your thigh is not parallel, okay? There's nothing wrong with that. Okay, the benefit of getting your thigh lower is, of course, it's more hip strength, right? So you build endurance in your hips. You're creating a little bit more mobility here. It creates more movement through your hips when your stance is a little bit tighter. So if I move my back foot in a little bit, my stance is shorter and I don't get my thigh down, it's much more stable of a pose, but there's less mobility. And this is a pose where you actually do want a fair degree of mobility, right? Because you want your hips to be able to move so that you can get that nice neutral pelvis, so you can turn your thigh in just a little bit. Okay, so I advocate for that wider stance, wider than what you might typically see in a Warrior One, so that you have the mobility that you need for the pose. Okay, so a couple of poses that can help prepare you for Warrior One. The first one, which is a little bit unconventional, is a twist. So if you're in a lunge, your right hand is down, back heel is lifted. So if I'm in a twist with my left leg forward, right heel is lifted, back leg is strong, left arm is up. So what this is doing is it's already orienting me a little bit more forward. Now, if I put my back heel down from here, my right heel comes down, toes point slightly on the diagonal, my hips are already pointing the direction that I want them to be. So when I lift up, shazam, right? I'm already there. So it's a really great way to prep for Warrior One is your twist. Okay, so again, and I'll show from the front so it's a little bit more obvious. If I'm in a twist with my right leg forward, right arm up, all I have to do is put my back heel down slightly. My foot is going to turn out, but it points me more on the diagonal instead of straight forward. And then I can lift from my pelvis to come up. So it's a really great way to prepare your body for this pose in a very foundational way, okay, especially if you're coming from the ground up. Okay, another great pose to prepare for Warrior One is a little bit unconventional too, and that's pigeon pose. Pigeon. I know, it's not a stretch, but it's already asking you to do something that might be challenging. Now, I love pigeon pose. I have a great tutorial for it, and I'll put that in the description so you can find that too in case you need a how-to for pigeon. But pigeon pose If my right leg is forward, all of the actions are going to be the same, and the basic shape is the same too, okay, for the most part. So what's happening here is my pelvis wants to tilt forward because my front leg is doing a lot of external rotation, just like Warrior One. My back leg is getting a lot of stretch. So I can't really square myself all the way forward, which is fine. There's a little bit more of that diagonal pointing. But the actions are the same. If I squeeze my legs in, top of my pelvis up, bottom of my pelvis down, I get a little lift, arms up. This makes Warrior One feel fairly easy. Okay, and I'm not saying you should go from pigeon into Warrior One, but just to sort of show you, if I lift and wiggle my right foot over, left knee up, oh yeah, pigeon to Warrior One. It makes Warrior One feel very easy and very nice. Okay, so I'm a big fan of pigeon pose before Warrior One. Okay, very non-traditional, but that's kind of my jam. So pigeon pose before Warrior One preps your hips really nicely, it preps your balance really nicely, it preps your back thigh really nicely, and it gives you a lot of the same actions that you're going to need for Warrior One. Okay, finally, the last pose that I really like to do before Warrior One is Parsvottanasana. So Parsvottanasana, also known as pyramid pose. Now, part of the reason that I like to do this pose is that, again, it's the same shape of the legs. So my back foot is down, my back heel is down, but my toes are more on the diagonal, just like Warrior One. Okay, it's also really nice because it's a forward bend. But I can really start working on anchoring back into my back leg. So if I really push through my right foot, extend my right foot firmly into the earth, I can start working that steadiness and support. Okay, and then once I lift myself up, I can actually do everything that I need from here, top of the pelvis up, bottom of the pelvis down. Okay, not aggressively so my hips swing forward, woo, but enough so that I've now turned myself a little bit more on the diagonal and I can control the descent. Meaning, if I come from upright, right, from the top of Parsvottanasana, I can push through my right leg as I lower my hips. And the top of my body doesn't change very much. So it's a really nice pose to do before Warrior One to get me ready for it so I can enter into it really smoothly. So those are the three poses that I like to do if I'm working specifically on Warrior One to get my body a little bit more ready for it so that it feels a little bit nicer and a little bit easier. Okay, so hopefully this has given you some new insights into Warrior One. I hope that it's made you feel a little bit more comfortable in Warrior One, a little bit less annoyed by it. This used to be a pose that I totally hated, but once I got really into it, once I figured out the dynamics of it, made it so much simpler. It made my body so much happier to be able to get into it from a lot of different poses and from the way that I wanted to. So, you know, knowledge is power, y'all. Hopefully this has given you a little bit more power to your Warrior One. So let me know what you think of this how-to video in the comments below. Let me know how your Warrior One feels after trying some of these new ways of prepping for it and getting into it. And as always, if you are not yet subscribed, please click on that bottom, I think it's in the bottom right corner, click on the little button in the bottom right corner so that you can get videos like this every single Sunday delivered directly to your inbox so that we can hang out in the yoga mat all the time. So thanks for tuning in. Thank you for being here. And I look forward to seeing you back on the mat again really soon. Until then, bye.